This story begins with a person about whom no one would have thought she would become a hero. Before the war, Maria Oktyabrskaya was an ordinary woman. There were millions of them in the Soviet Union. Maria was born in 1905 to a poor peasant family in what is now Crimea. There were 10 children in the family. Despite the hardships, Maria was stubborn, tough, and independent from an early age. In her youth, she moved to Tomsk and later to Omsk. It was there that her official labor biography began. She worked as a telephone operator. A telephonist in the USSR was not just a person connecting conversations. It was an important and responsible job, especially in state institutions. Maria didn't just sit at the switchboard. She began to take an interest in military affairs. And seriously, on her own initiative, she took a course for orderlies, learned how to handle a rifle, learned the basics of driving and engineering. For the 1930s, it was extremely unusual. Women in the army then were mostly in the rear, in the kitchen or in medical centers. And Maria was engaged in shooting sports, learning to shoot accurately and quickly. In 1938, she joined DOSAAF, a defense organization where citizens were taught military science. She was breaking the templates about what a proper Soviet woman should be. Instead of knitting, a rifle; instead of a kitchen, courses for mechanics. In the early 30s, she married Ilya Oktyabrskaya, an officer in the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army. It was then that her interest in the army became even more serious. She started listening to her husband's talks, reading military literature, participating in voluntary exercises. One could say that she was living in the atmosphere of the war long before it began. Maria was not just a military wife. She was a woman who understood that the army was not only a man's job. She didn't wait for orders from above. She acted on her own. But everything changed in an instant. When the Great Patriotic War broke out, Maria, like millions of other women, stayed on the home front. She waited for letters, hoping for news from the front. Her husband, Ilya Oktyabrskaya, went to the front line in the first months of the war. He was a cadre officer, a man who meant everything to her. It was not just a family, it was a support, the meaning of life. One day a letter arrived from the military enlistment office. In it, a short official phrase, "Your husband, Senior Lieutenant Oktyabrskaya, fell to the death of the brave." No details, no explanations, just the dry paper that put a stop to it. She didn't scream, didn't cry in public. She simply clutched the letter in her hand, and something inside her changed forever. For Maria, this wasn't just grief. It was the loss of her whole life. He was her support, her raison d'être. She called him the best man in the world. They lived together for over a decade. They moved through garrisons together, shared both poverty and joy. She had always followed him, but now she was alone. The war took away not only her husband, but everything that was connected with the past. Most people in such a situation become depressed. Some people withdraw into themselves. Some just try to survive. But that's not what Maria did. She went on the offensive. A few weeks after receiving the funeral, she made a decision that shocked even the army. She sold everything she had: clothes, furniture, crockery, jewelry, literally anything that could be exchanged for money. With the proceeds, almost 50,000 rubles, which at the time was the equivalent of several flats, she decided to buy a tank, a T-34 battle tank. The goal was the same: to hand it over to the army and to go into battle herself to avenge her husband. But a tank is not just a purchase, it's military equipment. A woman couldn't just go in and sit behind the levers. So she went even further. She wrote a personal letter to the Kremlin, directly to Joseph Stalin. In the letter, she did not ask, but demanded to give her the right to drive the very tank she had paid for. In military circles, this letter was at first perceived as madness. A woman at the front, and even in a tank, such a thing did not happen, especially not voluntarily. But after a while, permission came. And not just for nothing. Her act became a symbol. It was in the newspapers. It inspired others. But at first, everyone just didn't believe she could do it. But she did. The army gave the go-ahead. But that didn't mean that Maria was immediately given a tank and sent to the front line. The decision to allow a woman to drive a combat vehicle caused a real storm in military circles. Many saw it as a show-off, others as a potential disaster. She proved her determination, but determination alone cannot drive a tank. So began the next stage, official training at the tank school. There she was given no indulgences. No one was going to let a woman go to the front just like that. To begin with, compulsory training at the tank school. There they prepared mechanic drivers and gunner radiators for the T-34, the most powerful fighting machine of its time. Maria was almost 40 years old at that time. The other cadets were mostly 20-year-old guys. To them, she looked like an ant from the rear. Her appearance caused laughter and ridicule. Some joked that she should be in the infirmary, not in the tank. But the laughter didn't last long. From the first day, Maria began to study with full dedication. Theory, the structure of the tank, types of ammunition, engine operation, radio communication, practice, driving, shooting, work in combat conditions. All this she went through on a par with the men, and very quickly it became clear she was not just coping, she was better than everyone else. At the end of her training, she was handed her papers. She officially became a mechanic driver of the T-34 tank, and with that she received her own fighting vehicle. She gave the tank a name, Battlemate. This tank became for her an extension of herself. But the hardest part was just beginning. Because now it's not a drill. Now it's a real war. When Maria Oktyabrskaya came to the front as a member of the 26th Guards Tank Brigade, many thought that it was just a beautiful story for the newspapers. A woman tanker sounds spectacular, but no one believed that she would last in a real battle. Maria herself understood. She would be tested not by words but by actions. And she was ready for it. The first battle happened near Smolensk in October 1943. The Soviet units were on the offensive, and Battle Buddy moved forward with the other vehicles. The enemy was entrenched on a height and covered the approach to the village with artillery. Tanks went across the open field, and one after another came under fire. Maria drove the tank under heavy fire. At some point, another Soviet tank caught fire next to her. The crew got out, but the vehicle could explode and cover the entire flank. Then she made an instant decision. She turned her vehicle and hit a German artillery battery that was firing at the Allies. This saved not only the crew of the neighboring tank, but also the entire attack area. In her first battle, Maria personally took out an enemy firing point and saved the men. The command recognized this officially. But not everything went smoothly. After the battle, her tank was damaged. Most tankers in such a situation waited for technicians. But Maria did something different. She climbed out of the tank right under fire and fixed the Caterpillar, engine or instruments herself. This was no accident. She did it several times, risking her life. Some commanders even forbade her to get out of the tank, but she would not listen. Her fellow soldiers, who had treated her with irony in the beginning, began to look at her with respect. She wasn't just part of the crew, she was a leader, a commander, a mechanic, and a fighter, all in one. Maria didn't wait to be accepted. She had proven her worth through action, not rank. The soldiers gave her a new nickname, Tank Mother. It wasn't a condescending title. It was recognition, so the frontline soldiers called those who not just fight, but do it with heart, with dedication. She began to be called to general meetings, consulted. Some soldiers asked the command to leave Maria in their unit because they felt more confident around her. After the battle, she herself bandaged the wounded, helped to pull out shells from the battlefield, and even supervised the repair of other crews' vehicles. She did not demand special treatment and did not ask for favors. On the contrary, always went first, and this quickly became clear even to those who were initially against her presence at the front. With each battle, she became more and more confident, more and more cold-blooded. But the front forgives neither experience nor heroism. Winter 1944. Eastern Front, Belarus. The tank unit, where Maria Oktyabrskaya served, took part in fierce battles for the liberation of small villages from German troops. It was not a parade or a film. It was heavy fighting, where bullets and shells tore up the ground every minute. It was in one of these battles that her last appearance on the battlefield took place. During the offensive, her tank came under dense mortar fire. The machine was in the first line and suddenly stood up. The track was torn off. According to the rules, the crew had to wait for the technicians. But Maria again did what others would not dare: opened the hatch and climbed out to fix the breakdown herself. Mines were exploding all around. Snipers were firing at anyone who raised their head. But Maria started the repair right under fire. At that moment, a shell exploded nearby. A fragment hit Maria in the head, and she collapsed next to the tank. The soldiers immediately took her to the hospital. She was not just wounded, she fell into a coma and lay in such a state for almost 2 months. The doctors fought for her life, but the trauma was too severe. She did not regain consciousness. In March 1944, Maria Oktyabrskaya died without waking up. This battle was her last. But it was this act that finally convinced the army leadership that she was not a symbol, not a PR story, but a real hero. Her story was too extraordinary to be simply forgotten. A woman who bought a tank herself, went into battle and died not from fear, but from a direct hit by an enemy shell. The country's leadership decided the whole country should know about it. And in August 1944, Maria Oktyabrskaya was posthumously awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. It was the highest recognition, and she really deserved it. But few people know that during her lifetime, she became the first woman in the history of the USSR who was not just allowed to fight in a tank, but was officially assigned the combat position of mechanic driver. Before her, no one had been allowed to do so. The story of Maria Oktyabrskaya is not just a story about a woman at war. It is proof that willpower can be stronger than fear, and personal pain can turn into a weapon. She was not a professional soldier. She did not seek glory and did not wait for orders. She went where it was hardest on her own. She bought a tank, went to the front, fought alongside men, and died not as a symbol, but as a real soldier.